Good evening, everyone. Welcome once again to the Lepanto Institute's Anchor Team. I'm your host, Michael Hitchborn, and with me tonight is Jim Hester, who wrote this book, The Adventures of Auggie Thumb. And as you can see, my green screen is picking up the green in the book, so it looks like it's invisible, but I assure you it's not invisible. We're going to be talking about this. We're going to be talking about children's literature in general, the nature of children's literature, the importance of it. And before we get into any of that, of course, we're going to start with our prayer. In nomine Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum. Benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus.
Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen.
Our Lady of Victory.
Pray for us.
In nomine Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Okay, so Jim is I believe I saw in your bio that you are an engineer and that you abandoned your post as an engineer to write this book. So why don't you go ahead and start us off? Give us a little bit of your background. Tell us about yourself, and then we'll get into how you came to start writing and why you started writing and that kind of thing.
Okay. So I'll go back and just kind of do a little course correction on you. I have an engineering degree. I probably haven't worked as an engineer in 40 years, but
there we go.
I started off as an engineer and then moved into operational management. And then from there, I moved up. I've worked for a variety of different companies in different industries. And then 2 years ago, I retired as a VP of operations from a local company here in Vermont. And then one thing that I've always wanted to do, I've always been interested in writing and reading and literature. And so I had the time, I took the opportunity, and I started writing the book. And in conjunction with that, I also started my own operational management consultancy. And I've had a couple of clients and been doing that. So that's been going well. But I would say some people might have a passion for golf or sailing or something like that in their retirement. And for me, it's always been writing and reading. So at this point in time, I said, you know what? I looked around and surveyed the landscape, so to speak, and grandiose plans of big titles. And I just started thinking, what's really missing, what's really not out there are just good, wholesome, fun stories for kids, and primarily geared towards boys and boys as a protagonist. And so the book bears some familiarity to my past, I will admit. It's set in 1971 in Iowa. That's where, oddly enough, I grew up, and that's where I was 10 years old. So I drew on a lot of experiences in my past, embellished them heavily, stretched the truth as much as I could, because my whole focus was to make a humorous, entertaining story that kids would want to read, and also give them a little taste or exposure to what life was like before everybody was holding a computer in their hand.
My wife and I were talking about this earlier because she read the story aloud to our kids, and so I was listening in, and we would talk a little bit about the book. And one of the things that just really came through was that the 1960s and the 1970s were very, very, very different from the world that we have right now. For one thing, you were telling us in an email exchange that you and your brother had kind of a competition with reading a book, a Western novel that you had mentioned. And it's a funny anecdote. I'll let you tell that story. But the fact of the matter is that in the 70s, kids, we were kicked outside. You know, I grew up I was born in 75, so I grew up in the late 70s, early 80s, and we were constantly kicked outside. We're always riding our bikes. We were, playing in the garden hose and running around the yard, and we didn't have parental oversight with everything that we did. But now we have helicopter parents. We've got handheld devices that allow kids to just be locked into their own little world without any connection or communication with the outside world. They're just totally locked in whatever they're doing. You hardly see kids outside riding bikes and playing in the yard and jumping in the sprinkler and all that kind of stuff. You don't see that much anymore. And I think that the simplicity of the story that you tell in this book is not only compelling, but important and necessary for reminding kids that, hey, there's a world outside of the little black box that you carry in your pocket.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so the childhood you described, very similar to the same childhood that I had. In the absence of having I refer to it as a computer, it's euphemistically referred to as a phone. Very rarely do people use it as a phone. But even so, the whole concept that you could immediately just pick up your phone, that concept didn't even exist. It was the family had a phone that was attached to the wall, and we were surprised that they have people that have phones that sit on a desk. That's crazy. Ours had the kitchen phone, and we had the one phone in the house. And so if you wanted to call your friend, you would get on the phone and you had to do the rotary dial, and then you had to hope that phone line wasn't busy. And I relate in the story that, matter of fact, my good friend, my best buddy that lived just catty corner from us, a house away, I could actually run over to his house faster than I could dial the phone, or so I thought as a 10-year-old. But you mentioned the simplicity of life then in this story. And I agree that all the vices, all the issues, all the troubles, all the sins of the world existed then as they existed 2,000 years ago and as they exist today. But what's happened is, and I'm not saying technology is bad because we're using technology today, but what technology has enabled is those that are interested in propagating sinful behavior can do it at the speed of light, can do it exponentially faster and to a greater breadth and without any control. How many parents that have kids have phones these days, how many parents are actually seeing what's on that screen with their child sitting in a chair that could be 5 feet away from them looking at who knows what? So I look at that back in that time in the early 70s, well, 50 years ago, easiest way to say it. And 50 years ago, that stuff didn't exist. So what we had to do as kids, we wanted to play, we wanted to have fun. We had to make our own fun. We couldn't just pick up a phone, scroll around on it, watch a movie, watch a show, watch a video, do whatever. That didn't exist. So if we wanted to go out and play, we went out and played. We had to try to get other kids to play ball. We had to, if we wanted to go somewhere, we couldn't watch a movie of it or do it virtually. We got on our bike and rode there. And yeah, we were always on our bikes. We found in the wintertime, we made our own fun. We'd go sledding. Snow pants didn't exist. We wore 2 pair of jeans. Yep. And we had our galoshes over our shoes, and we didn't freeze to death. We didn't get pneumonia. My parents used to say, if they're cold, it's the same thing we did with our kids. We'd say, hey, if they get cold, they'll come in. And I don't want to make it sound like this is a lost bygone era that can't be recouped, because I think it's up to parents today. And my parents, I'm sure, had all the challenges that I didn't realize. They had those challenges back then, and we have those challenges today that we as parents realize, and we see them. They've become in the forms of technology, and so parents today have to have the same vigilance. My parents wanted to know who our friends were. My parents wanted to know, if you're going to school, okay, if you're going to ride your bike to school ends at 2:45 or whatever, you'll be home by 3. If you're not going to be home by 3, let me know what you're going to do. Right. But it wasn't like we had free license, but there was a level of respect and communication, but you had to plan on it. And nowadays, parents turn their kids loose with the phone and away they go. My kids didn't get phones until they were in high school. And they were, my daughter still, she thanked me now she's a mom herself. But when she got her first phone, she was saying like, hey, everybody else in school has these phones. How come it's only me and one other girl that don't have them? I said, well, it's because we love you. Yeah. Right. Fun to say as a parent, but so I'm sorry I'm wandering a bit, but to just kind of go back to your point about a simpler time. I believe it was, because there wasn't just this deluge of propaganda, deluge of entertainment, deluge of screens and material that just was just drowning kids. And so I talk about the book and relate an incident that involves the TV. And I said, there's only 3 channels. For the longest time, not counting the public information channel, there was only 3 channels that you could watch. And my parents didn't let it, if you're inside watching TV, that's not okay. So it was maybe in the evening you could watch a show, and it was a family thing. It was not just, oh, he's up in his room with his own TV. That's ridiculous.
Right. Yeah. I remember growing up, we had the little tune-in dial that was next to the channel dial. So it would go 1, 2, 3, or whatever. I think it was 2, 3, 4, and then you had the UHF channels. But you had that little tune-in dial too, so that you had the rabbit ears, and you had to, it was actually work trying to get the proper TV signal. But we didn't live around the television. We had one. We didn't live around it, and you're right. As time progressed, if we wanted to watch a movie, it was always something that we did together as a family. The Friday evening matinee, or whatever the movie of the week on Saturday afternoon was. It was just one of those things. And unfortunately now kids, they can dial up whatever movie they want. They just put it on their phone. They're sitting there, they're staring away. And then when they're done with it, they put on another one, and then another one. And you see, I remember looking at pictures of kids from the 70s, kids from the 80s, and they were stocky. You look at them running around on the track field and hanging out at picnics and things like that. You didn't see there were obviously portly people, but you didn't see a whole lot of them. But now you look at pictures of kids today, they're pasty white. They either have limbs that are about as thin as twigs, or they're obese. And the reason is that they're not doing anything. They're not going outside. They're not engaging. And most of them have a mental disengagement from not just their family, but there's a mental disengagement from interaction with their friends. The only communication they have with their friends, whatever they can text with their thumbs.
Yeah, I agree. And you use that word friends. I could count my good friends essentially on one hand, because I had really good friends. I had friends that I saw them every day, or I saw them in school. I'd see lots of kids in school, but the concept of a good friend, a real true friend, someone that cares about you and whom you care about, you'll do whatever he needs, and because he'll do whatever you need to help you out. That concept is I think is lost. Yeah. And I think it's, I've got 5,000 friends. No, you don't. You have these, they're not even friends. They don't even know you exist. You've got so many likes and these other things. So instead of, and I know that probably both of us could go on bashing today, but I think I look at today and I look at my kids. My kids are grown, and we have four kids, 3 of them married. We got 1 grandchild, another one on the way. So we're excited about being, as my daughter referred to us, as luxury parents. We can come in and have all the fun with none of the responsibility. But we had to earn our way there, and so, but I watched the way they're trying to raise their child. They're they met on Catholic Match. They are very devout Catholics, and all my children are, and which I'm just pleased at. They humble me in their faith, and I look at other children, other families at Mass each day, each time, and in Sunday Masses especially. The church is full. It's a Latin Mass, traditional Latin Mass, but we have so many young families with, I'd say the average age in our parish is probably 10, and that's counting all the adults. And it's not unique to our parish. That's any Latin Mass parish I've been to when traveling. It's the same story, and I'm sure it's the same at yours. And so that gives me hope. And when I talk to these parents, and they're limiting most of them don't have TVs in the house. We cut the cord here. We they are working. They have an active part in their, use the term helicopter parent, and I know what you mean by that. But a parent today has to be aware of what's going on with their children,
Right.
all the influences out there. But I think in the context which I think you used it, and I agree with you, is you can't be the parent on the sideline. Oh, what do you mean? At a little league game or something, and their child gets thrown out at first. Oh, he wasn't out; he beat it. Or don't let him do that. You need to go tell your teacher they're not allowed to do. It's that getting involved in the children's life, trying to protect them from failure. And one of the things I wrote in the book is, because experience comes from failure, right?
Yep.
One of the things a couple of times I put in the book, I purposely made it so that Auggie, the main character, wasn't always successful, wasn't always the center of attention. When they got their new dog, for instance, he wasn't the one that got to pick out the name. He wasn't the one that whose lap the dog sat on the way home. So, and I think that's important, that kids learn that, you know what, somebody else can get the limelight, and it's learning humility and accepting it and going, hey, I'm part of a family, so I'm going to make mistakes. My family loves me. They're going to help me learn from these things. They're going to have my back. But if you had, I don't know your family when you grew up, but if you have older brothers like I did, they're going to make you pay for every inch of ground you can get.
I was the eldest, so I made my younger siblings pay.
So there you go. And I see that dynamic still existing in the families of today. And I agree with you that there's a lot of kids that don't have that advantage. And I think one of the things, and I'm going to tie this back to literature, one of the things that enables that is that society has got to the point that if you are to mention that, well, a family is a man and his wife and their children, and no, two homosexuals can't have children. No, that's, there's behaviors that aren't okay, or we need to, this is what quote unquote normal is, or the good, the true, and the beautiful. Society has redefined that. And so now what ends up happening is there is no sense of shame is gone. The sense of, oh, this is proper. Now anything can be proper. And so what I wanted to do with my book was I wanted to step back, not be overtly moralizing or lecturing, but just tell a story in such a way that what the events that happen to Auggie, the main character, are ones where he's got to make decisions. He's got to, and he's not going to run to his mom and dad and say, well, what should I do? He's got to grow up. A little boy has to grow up to be a man, and a little girl has to grow up to be a woman. And, back, I don't know, 10 years ago. I know, 10 years ago, if you said that, well, people would look at you and say, duh. And the sad thing is that when you say that today, you get ostracized, and they're saying, oh, well, that's extremist. Yeah. So to tie it back to literature, when I looked at the titles, and I'm going from when I was getting books for our children, and I would look for books and go, this is dumb, this is bad, I don't want to give this, I don't want to give that. And I found myself drawn to books written in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. I'd find old books. There's some just brilliant old books out there. And that's what we built our library on for our kids. And so then as I did that, and once I retired, I thought, I can do that. I want to write a story. I want to write a book. And so I wrote my book in such a way that it's episodic, and there's 19 chapters. And each chapter you could read on its own. And they tie together in the story arc is one where you have Auggie, the youngest of four, and he's going to face challenges, adventures, things of his own doing, things that weren't of his doing. But each step along the way, he grows a little bit. He makes a decision. He has something happen to him. He gets a new responsibility. He understands what happens when he makes a bad decision. But at the end, he's matured to the point that his father says, yes, we're going to, well, I'm not going to spoil the ending, but it goes along on an arc where he advances. Now, to tie that back to today's literature, what I found is that that story arc is gone.
Yeah.
And if it does exist, it's now nothing against girls, because I have two of them, but the point is that now all of a sudden it's the girl is the manly hero, the boy is the sap, and so I said, coming from the perspective of I want to have a book that boys will enjoy, I started to, that was my premise for writing this book. It was geared mainly to boys. I finished my manuscript, and then I started reaching out to literary agents. And Michael, I tell you, the literary agents that I reached out to, first of all, 98% of them are women, which is fine. But when you have that right away, that's going to skew most things to feminist titles and girl-oriented titles. Great for girls, bad for boys.
But not so great for girls.
Pardon me?
But not so great for girls, because what they're feeding the girls is a false idea of what a girl and what a woman is supposed to be. And you mentioned, kind of the girl power mentality that comes from a lot of these books, where they make the main heroine this girl who outdoes all the boys, who has stronger morals or a stronger moral compass than the boys, and outperforms them, and even in some cases is the one who rescues them when they do something stupid. And this is something that my mother and I have talked about for a long time, because I grew up listening to old radio programs from the 40s and 50s. And one of the programs that I used to listen to was The Life of Riley. And The Life of Riley, it was a comedy, and it was kind of funny. But the thing is, Riley was the father, the husband, the family man, but he was a buffoon. And everything about the show was centered around how he was a buffoon, and he would do these stupid things that would get him into trouble. And the rest of the family would have to make up for the fact that he was doing these stupid things. And his daughter Babs was the smart one in the family, and she was constantly either bailing him out or, but that's something that's carried on throughout from the 60s all the way through the 70s, 80s, and 90s, where you have these television shows that make out husbands and fathers to be buffoons. And it's either the wife or the daughter that has to be the normal one to bail them out and prevent them from doing something really stupid or off the wall. That has carried through now into children's literature. And it's not just so much about the fathers, because most of these literature books, they eliminate the father. Mm-hmm. There is no father in the story. And these girls grow up in a fatherless house home, and they become empowered somehow, whether it's through witchcraft or superpowers, or, it's this fantasy on steroids. And the little girls in the protagonists in the story wind up through, not because of character, but through some sort of power that they have inherent in them, which is very Gnostic. They go in and they become the ones who save the world or save the day or save whatever it is. And the boys are made out to be either buffoons or just sidekicks to what the heroine is doing. And it's awful.
Yeah, I agree. And better said. And so when I wrote The Adventures of Auggie Thumb, I wrote it from a perspective of, I didn't want to make it fantasy. I didn't want to make it, undercover secret agent or anything that was just so beyond the realm of reality. I thought, because reality in and of itself can be really interesting and can be fun. And So I wanted to make it in a way, I wanted to write a book that would be relatable. So if a 10-year-old boy or a 12-year-old girl, it doesn't matter. It's girls, I've had good input from girls on it. They like it too. But so a child, a 10, 11, 12-year-old child, whatever, reading this book can relate to it and say, oh, I did that. Or, oh yeah, that could happen. And they can truly see it because he's not skydiving out of an airplane to behind enemy lines, or he's not, grabbing a laser gun to do X, Y, or Z. It's written in such a way that these kids can look at these things and in a way they can go off, we could do that too. Hey, let's play that game. Or, yeah, I should get involved and that'd be fun to join a team, or it'd be fun to go hunting or fun to go shooting. And that's another thing is I wanted to make a point to bring in the firearms into the book and show kids that you can responsibly use a firearm, whether it's target practice at camp, or it's hunting with your, father and uncles in this case. And so it's because these are manly pursuits that boys need to do. And so it was important that I put that in there and put it in a way. And this is why I don't think a single literary agent was interested in it. And I even was narrowed my search to conservative Christian children's literary agents. And 201, I couldn't find one. I even had one that wasn't in that group, but it was one literary agent for children's book that said they absolutely did not want anything religious, anything Christian, especially Catholic. And I was just thought to myself, this is horrible, because these are the people that are determining which books go into the libraries and go onto the bookshelves in bookstores for people to buy. And
well, the thing is, your book. So again, we're talking about The Adventures of Auggie Thumb by Jim Hester. The book isn't it is Catholic in the sense that there are Catholic characters, but it's not overt. It's not like you're preaching a sermon and saying, oh, and this is why we go to mass on Sundays, and this is why we say our rosary. There's nothing like that. It's just, it's more a part of the setting than it is anything else. They're Catholic. Correct. Okay. Yeah. So move on.
Yeah. And that's, and I did that on purpose. I wanted to make it's not a story about a boy being Catholic. It's a boy in a Catholic family.
Right.
And as you said, he goes to Catholic school, but that's about it. And in the course of his days, yes, I think on the Sunday they come back from mass. And I used the word mass and I used the word church, and I intermingled those because I was writing it in the way that a 10-year-old would talk. And so he'd say, well, as soon as I get home from church, I can change out of these clothes and get into my play clothes, and off I go. That's as alive today as it was back then. But the point I was going to drive to, Michael, is that literary agents really control what goes in front of our kids, because they're the gatekeepers that are stop books from being published that they don't agree with. And when 95 to 98% of them are completely woke and they're pushing that kind of an agenda, then everything that I created in my book is off topic, is opposite of what they want to see. And so then, as I did a little research, I started looking at, go on Amazon and I would search books about boys hunting, or hunting books for boys. And I would find them, and those titles are out there, and there's some good little books out there, but to every single one of them, I couldn't find one that a major publisher had picked up. Now, the exceptions might be like the Hatchet series, where a kid's in the wilderness. And those are good books about a kid a plane crashed or something. I can't remember the whole thing. But it's a good story of survival. And I think that's a pretty famous book, and it's picked up by a publishing house. But all these other ones, like there's stories about kids learning how to deer hunt or things like that. Anything that involved a firearm, all those authors were self-published. They had created their own publishing, as I am, and created their own publishing companies, as I did. And I could tell that right away. And that's how they're able to get those stories out. And sadly, I'm guessing they represent probably less than 1% of the books out there. And without having the backing of a major publisher, you're not going to get into the major bookstores or feature prominently. Now, one thing I will say about Amazon, which is great, the more you sell and the more positive reviews you get and the more you advertise, the higher up in the rankings your book will go. And when I first launched The Adventures of Auggie Thumb, we got up to, and you can create and you can pick the genre that your book is in, the classification. We got up to number 10 in Christian children's humor literature. So that was fun. And so it's been just a constant promotion, letting people know the book is out there. I've gotten great reviews. It's a lot of fun. I just, matter of fact, just last night, this friend of my wife's just wrote her and said, "Hey, when's he going to get the second book out? My kids want to know." So whenever I see things like that, I really enjoy hearing that, because I know there's an acceptance for it, and I like that.
I want to talk a little bit about the book itself. There are certain anecdotes, as you mentioned in here, that give a moral lesson without being moralizing. Again, it's not a preaching of a sermon, but it's a natural story with natural consequences, and they're real world scenarios. They're not it's not forced at all. Some of them are humorous and some of them are very serious. One humorous story that you have in here has to do with putting live bait in an aquarium with fish that they're not really compatible with. I'll let you tell that. But one of those you'd mentioned earlier on about the importance of friendships and the importance of having close friends, and not just being confidants, but being somebody who can, as a close friend. My best friend from third grade is still my best friend. We've known each other for almost 50 years. It's pretty incredible. But we talk about friendships, and you look at the nature of friendships. A friendship is supposed to be, the purpose of a friendship is to help you become more virtuous, to help lead you to a virtuous life. You have a story in here, or an anecdote in here, where Auggie gets into a situation where he has to, how do you put it? He has to make a choice between two friends. And in that scenario, he winds up leaving the one he thought he was his friend, and he goes on with somebody else. So I want you to tell these stories, because it is your story, and you tell it in such a great way that I think that it's more appropriate for you to tell the stories. But I'd like you to talk about that just a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So in that incident, or the scenario that you're talking about, and again, I'll say this was not an autobiography. This is a fiction book. And I took great liberty with the truth, but there is an element of truth to it. And the story relates to Auggie at school, and he's got this group of friends, and he really looked up to these kids, and these kids were like the quote unquote popular kids. And so he enjoyed being in that circle. And then a new kid comes into town, a new child comes in that's going to attend school, and Auggie meets him, is nice to him. And as he comes into the classroom, and one of the big things that goes on in the school is the basketball team. And anybody that goes to parochial school knows that, the sports are big, and basketball is always the big thing. So they want to be on Auggie's not a star, he's a player, he's on the team. And one of the kids that he thinks is his best friend is one of the star players. Well, the new kid that shows up, it turns out he's a pretty good basketball player, but he's humble. He's just out there playing hoops, and he ends up taking the spot of the really good kid, or the kid that was on the team and as supposedly the star. And he takes it and he gets upset over that. And then Auggie, I don't want to spoil all the story and tell everything, but it puts Auggie in a position where, am I going to stand by my friend and not like this other friend? And this actually happened when I was in school. I'll just tell you what happened with me. It was the new kid came in, and he was a really good athlete, and he did take a spot on the basketball team. And one of the players, the existing players on the team, one of the kids, my quote unquote friend, says, well, we're not going to like him. I thought that was really stupid. Why would I not like him? And so it came to a situation where there actually was a fight out behind the school, and the kid that was in the on the team originally, he ended up losing that, and it was essentially just a one-punch fight. And what I noticed, and I still remember, it struck me to this day, is that the boy that turned out to become my really good friend, it really bothered him because he didn't want to fight. He wasn't interested in fighting. He just wanted to play basketball and meet new kids and be part of a new team and a new group. Yeah. And he was forced into a situation where he had no choice. He couldn't back down, and it was thrust upon him. And that opened my eyes to, these guys are fake. I'm not going to support that. I had to make a choice. I had to choose. I can't continue to be with these guys. I need to go with him. And so when the individual said, well, we're not going to like him, we're just essentially going to shun him. So no, I'm not. Because when you're not with us. Now, as years went by, we all drifted apart, but I still remember then carrying on into high school. My original, what I thought were my really good friends, they drifted away. The other guy, we became really good friends, and I started becoming friends with a different group of kids. And so Auggie is faced with the same type of situation, same type of scenario where he has to make a choice. And he has to stand up for what's right. And it's a difficult decision because he's going to lose everything that he thought was good and fun. But in the end, when the outcome of his decision making is he's going to see that making the right decision can be hard, but always works out best in the end. Yep. So I was trying to tell you all that without giving it away.
Yeah, no. That was really good because this is the kind of moral. It's a moral story without being moralizing, and that's kind of what I'm trying to get across to our audience here, is that the way that you construct the stories, they're real world scenarios with real consequences and real choices that have to be made. Some made for the better, some made for the worse. But the consequences are very real. They're very believable. As you said, they're partially autobiographical, but even in that instance, it doesn't really matter because the fact is that we do need to learn from our real world experiences. And kids, when they read stories like this, it makes them think. And they're going to think about that. Wow, what would I do in a situation like that? Gosh, have I ever been in a situation like that? Gosh, maybe I didn't make a right choice when something similar happened with me. I remember when I was growing up, I'd be reading books similar to this, and I was asking myself these same questions. What would I do in this situation? Or, that really struck me because that happened to me last week. So I think that what you are doing in writing this book, in presenting this story as a moral format without being moralizing is really the most important thing for kids because it's not in today's literature.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find that when you try to moralize, when you try to correct or instill discipline, or it can be a struggle, at least for me, especially when you go overt. I even make a point in there where I made a comment about Auggie. When his dad starts going off on some topic, he just stops listening. And I will be the first to admit that I did that a lot when my dad would start giving me what you got to do. And my kids, one of my boys laughed at that and says, Dad, I love it that you put that in there, that once Dad starts talking, Auggie turns off in that regard. And I said, yeah, I know, Joe, you did that to us. And it's just that humor, but what's never missing, what was never turned off was respect. Mm-hmm. You had, it's Auggie shows his dad clearly loves him. He clearly loves his dad. He clearly respects his dad. He understands the boundaries. And when he forgets the boundaries in one instance, he gets brought back very quickly and realizes what he has to do, how he has to be. And it's simple little things, you know. And it's actually what I just said. It's the saying, I know. That was always a pet peeve of my parents. It's a pet peeve of mine, is when I would tell my children to do something, or I'll put it in the context. If my dad said, you know, he would say, you need to do X, Y, Z. I say, I know. And I'd get that look. And we all get it. And it'd be, okay, sorry, Dad. Yes, I will. Yep. And so that kind of a concept is not, if I'd said in the book, don't ever say you know or I know to your parents, it's going to stay on the shelf and the cover will be closed. But to relate an incident where that's just subtly put in there, that puts that point through. Oh, well, he's saying, yes, sir. He's treating him with respect. You know, that's the importance. And that's what I was trying to achieve.
I think you achieved it very well. And the, again, the anecdotes, they're humorous. They stick with you. I mean, my wife was telling me some of the anecdotes as you were going along, and I still remember them. They're very, very catchy, I guess is a really good way of putting it. You just kind of catch on what the anecdote was. You recognize the moral for what it is, but it's not the central point. It just is. And that's really important in storytelling. And I think that you tell the stories very well. It's very reachable by kids, but it's also appreciable by adults. So you do a very good job in writing these stories. So tell us about part 2 or the next adventure.
So I am working on one. I actually have 2 books that I'm working on right now. They're very conceptual. And what I did in the same way, the way I did the first book was I made a goal. I'm going to write 1,000 words a day and sit down and just write 1,000 words. The book is about 34,000 words. And then the easy part was just flowing all the content. The hard part is editing it and putting it together and going back and looking at it and making sure, is this funny? And then taking it to my kids. And even though they're older, they give me their inputs, and then doing having a test group to go out and say, what do you think of this? And I always prefaced it with, and I went to a lot of kids from the church and their families, and I said, I want you to tear it apart. Tell me what's stupid. And I would use that word. I said, because I don't want to write. I want to talk in a way I want to be very blunt. I don't want to write something that you think is stupid, is moralizing, is not funny, you know, or because it's got to have an element of humor to attract. So right now, what I'm doing for the second book is I'm starting to collect the anecdotes. I'm starting to, and they're not. Oh, I'll tell you one thing. There's one incident in Auggie that had nothing to do with me as a child. It was with one of my boys, a little thing he had done, and my wife, and it was actually my wife who suggested that I put that in there as one of the chapters. She goes, you should put that in what Ryan did. And I said, okay. I said, that's a good one. So I worked it into the book. I'll leave it to your wife and you to figure out which one that is, or anybody that buys the book, they can let me know if they think they know what incident involved my son and not me. But so I'm collecting those in somewhat. The point of me bringing that up is the anecdotes that I'm collecting aren't just all what happened to me 50 years ago or 40 years ago. It's kind of an amalgamation of different anecdotes, because I think it's important that it be based, that keeps it in reality. Because if you start trying, and it also makes it a little harder because at some point you run out of anecdotes, but I haven't had that problem yet. But if you start making them up out of whole cloth, I'm not good enough or smart enough to do that in such a way that it can be convincing. So I pull back on what I know. So that's the first book I'm working on, which is a continuation of Auggie. And I haven't titled it yet. I don't know when it's coming out, and it's going to take me a while. And then I am working also on a second book that's completely different. And I'll just leave it at that. But I think it'll have a good audience with traditional Catholics.
Excellent. Excellent. So the book, once again, The Adventures of Auggie Thumb. Please let our audience know where they can get a copy of the book, how they can follow you, where they can get updates on the next book or any additional books in the series.
Okay, so to answer the first question, that's the easiest. You can go on Amazon, and you can type it in by title, and search for it, and it will come up. Or you can go to turtlebaypress.com, all one word, turtlebaypress.com, and that has a little buy now button that will take you right to the book on Amazon, and you can buy it there. The paperback edition is $8.99, so it's less than $9. And the Kindle version is free. So I strongly encourage people to go and check it out. And I want to put a plug in for Amazon. For as evil as Amazon and Google and all those are, Amazon has done a really great job of creating the capability for authors to self-publish and to get stuff out there and make good quality books. And so I really appreciate that, because without that, I would not have been able to publish this. As far as updates and things and following me, you can follow me and you can reach out to me on turtlebaypress.com. There's a contact form there. Updates will come when I get a chance to do them. I'm pretty poor at that. But as I make some good progress, I'll let people know.
Fantastic. Once again, he is Jim Hester. He is the author of The Adventures of Auggie Thumb. Go to turtlebaypress.com. Highly recommend that you get a copy of this book. It's a great story for your kids. It's kind of a summer in the life of a young boy growing up in the early 1970s. I think it's a great story. It's a lot of fun. It's very funny in various parts, but there are also serious parts as well. Good story for young boys, especially, but I think it's something that the whole family can enjoy. Please, turtlebaypress.com. Go there, get a copy of the book. Please keep in touch and let us know when you get the next book out. We'll be happy to plug it and put a link to it as well. Okay, well, I really appreciate that, Michael. Thank you. All right, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening. Again, this is pre-recorded. I am currently on a trip. I will be back next week, and hopefully I'll give you a little bit of an update as to where I went, if I'm allowed to say. So hopefully it's a little tease, I know, but we'll get back to it when I get back. And in the meantime, why don't we close with our Ave? In nomine Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum. Benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus. Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen. Our Lady of Victory, pray for us. In nomine Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Jim Hester, thanks so much for joining us. Everybody else, we will see you next week. My pleasure, Michael.